And music icon Celine Dion is opening up about her battle with stiff person syndrome in a new documentary premiering this week. The singer shedding light on the rare autoimmune neurological disorder, also known for causing muscle stiffness and painful spasms. Now, other stiff person syndrome patients are finding community through social media and sharing their own reality of living with the condition. Influencers Carrie Jean and Corwin Wilkie are here now with more on how social media is helping them face stiff person syndrome. Thank you both so much for coming on. Carrie, I'd like to start with your story because you say you were on a flight when you had your first spasm and that doctors were actually dismissive of your condition even as your symptoms got worse. Can you tell me more about how this all started for you?
Hi, Diane. Thank you. Yeah, my husband and I were traveling and we got to our layover. And after we deplaned, I started to have pain shoot into my face and my neck and down my body. And I had previously had a injection in my neck for slip disc and nerve impingement. So we kind of thought maybe it was a complication from that. And it started us down the path of trying to figure out what was causing these incredibly painful spasms. And the doctors were just stumped. The first hospital we went to told us they weren't even equipped to deal with it, sent me to a different hospital, and doctors just kept scratching their heads, couldn't figure out what was going on.
And you said at some point they started saying that they thought it was psychosomatic?
Yeah, one of the early neurologists we saw said, there's a condition called FND. I think that some SPS patients, or not even just SPS, but autoimmune patients that have similar symptoms get told that in the beginning that it's possible to be a reason behind it. There was some talk of diagnoses like dystonia. Obviously, they looked into things like MS and lupus, and really it was just a matter of giving me all these tests and trying to rule things out. And then finally, one doctor looked at me and said, I actually know what this is. I have another patient that has this. You have stiff person syndrome. It was the first I'd ever heard of it. I hadn't even at that time heard of Celine having it. And I just looked for people out there like me that I could get information from and realized there really weren't any. So that's when I decided maybe I would be that person and make some TikToks and see if anyone could help me or if anybody knew what I was experiencing and they were experiencing the same thing, if maybe we could connect and find some common ground or some doctors to help us.
And I know you're changing lives just by sharing that story. Corwin, walk me through for you what it was like when you finally heard that diagnosis, stiff person syndrome, and how this impacts your day-to-day.
Leading up to it was pretty difficult. I had two bouts of something called Guillain-Barré syndrome before, which is another rare neurological autoimmune disease. And so coming out of that, I was like paralyzed in the hospital for about a month, and this was during the height of COVID. So I wasn't able to see my family through that, or I think I got to see my wife maybe for 10 minutes switching hospitals when I went into rehab. And we thought that maybe it was something else, something called CIDP, which is like a chronic version of this disease. And that got me rolling with the antibody panel, where they found that I had high levels of this antibody called GAD65, which is sort of the big blinking red flag biomarker for SPS. And so I didn't know what it was. I had started to read about it after getting the diagnosis, and even then, like hearing it from the doctors was really surreal. Because the harsh reality is that stiff person syndrome is a progressive and terminal disease. The life expectancy for most patients is between 10 and 20 years from diagnosis. So to be honest, it felt a little bit like a death sentence. I have somewhat of a bit different attitude now, 2 years later, but at the time, it was very difficult. I actually had attempted suicide and um, ended up going through a 3-week inpatient voluntary psychiatric hold. And then after that, I left the state and I did a intensive 14-week dialectic behavioral therapy. I had surgery to have a baclofen pump, intrathecal baclofen pump installed. And then after that, I did like 6 weeks at the pain rehabilitation clinic at St. Mary's on the Mayo campus in Rochester.
Oh, Corwin, I'm so glad to hear that you feel differently. You have a different outlook now, 2 years later. And Carrie, I'm wondering how you feel that both Celine Dion coming forward with her diagnosis and raising more awareness, and social media and the community that you've been able to create there. Carrie, how do you think that's helping with the physical toll, but also the mental toll that this diagnosis can take?
For me, honestly, social media has been a godsend. I mean, finding other people, and I think it's interesting to see that it's maybe not as rare as some of these doctors and reports think it is. There's a lot of dismissing of patients and their symptoms, and it takes really, really too long for doctors to be willing to listen to some of these rare disease patients and really understand that their pain is real and their symptoms are real, and maybe just because you hear hoof prints, it's not horses. Maybe this one time it's zebras. And I just think there's probably more zebras than they think there are. And being out in the community myself and finding those people that know what we're going through, know what Corwin and I have faced, and the treatments that we're looking for, and the help that we're looking for. And you know, honestly, until recently, where Corwin and I met at this Kyverna summit about innovative new treatment, neither one of us had even heard anything hopeful on the horizon. And now that we've heard of something that's potentially out there, I think we're both feeling, I don't know, a renewed sense of wanting to get out into our community and talk to these other SPS patients or potential SPS patients and let them know that, you know, maybe there's new things and we can all learn more about it from Celine and her documentary. And I really have nothing but just admiration and respect for her coming out and doing that, to be a celebrity and to be this vulnerable. I know some of my videos are really hard to watch, and for anybody to love their beloved icon like they do for Celine and then watch her go through something like that's really brave of her to do that. And I think it's really awesome, because otherwise people would probably never hear of this disease, and even more doctors would be dismissing patients. So I just think it's all for the best, honestly.
Well, I and I'm sure many others are hoping that awareness brings more breakthroughs for you both and so many others. Carrie, Jean, Corwin Wilkie, thank you both. And if you are struggling with any mental health distress, including thoughts of suicide, substance use, or emotional distress, we want you to remind you that you can text or dial 988. Free help is available 24/7.